Hello and welcome back to my channel. I'm Maren and this is Post Creature Pre-Dirt, a place where I am trying to share my writing journey and trying to share my experiences with creativity. Hang on, I think the cat needs to come inside. 1 second. I don't know if anyone watched my previous video, but I just went on a trip to India. I was given an incredible opportunity to go and film interviews for local features at the Planet Local Summit, which was really incredible. And honestly, if anything, it just made me feel so much more confident about this novel that I'm writing, this novel trilogy that I'm writing. And it was so special to be able to meet so many people who are doing really incredible work all over the world. You know, people who are creating eco villages, who are working in agriculture, who are creating farmers markets, who are doing all kinds of really innovative things all over the world. It just really made my soul feel happy because so much of my book rests on the premise that people like that existed. How do I want to say this? How can I say this in a way that's not confusing? My book rests on the premise that today, you know, because my book is set 300 years in the future after the fall of global civilization, it rests on the premise that right now there are people who are building lifeboats all over the world. So these people exist in a world that's post-modernity, post-globalization, and post-global civilization. And so it was really cool because it was kind of like I was seeing into the past, like in the present now, but in the past of what my characters are experiencing. And it just helped inspire so much of extra little bits of world building that I want to include. You know, I really want to feel like this book is a global world. You know, I think one of the things that I really love about fantasy, and I'm actually not that versed in fantasy, to be honest. I'm much more of a nonfiction reader, which is kind of makes this it kind of makes it feel a little weird that I'm so interested in fiction because I don't read as much fiction as I probably should. But, you know, taking Lord of the Rings for an example, you know, when you're reading that book, you just feel so immersed in the world. Like the world feels like a real place. And I think that that's something that's really special that fantasy can do in particular. I think that sci-fi does a good job of that as well, of just you know, you want things to feel baked in and lived in. And with my book, it's speculative fiction. It's set in our world. And I really want it to feel like this is a real world. This is a possible future. I really want the reader to walk away from this feeling like this world is lived in and this is actually a potential future that we could have. And, you know, in a way, I'm the part of the reason why I'm writing this story is not because I necessarily think that this is the ideal future or this is the future that's going to happen. But the way that I see it is a possible future. And I think it's worth imagining what that would look like in a very, very fleshed out way, in a very multicultural way too. It just really inspired me because one of the things that I've struggled with the most with writing my draft is the world building and recognizing the importance of culture and the way that culture shapes landscapes and the way that culture shapes the way that people behave. And I think that that's something that I really want to inject into my story, and that's something that you see very, very much in, you know, around the world. I think that, you know, it's easy to sort of forget that because when living in America, the culture feels like kind of an idea. You drive around and it's all the houses look the same, all the cities look the same, there's strip malls that look identical all across the continent, and it doesn't feel like there's that much culture. And you find it in certain pockets, you know, I've been really interested in wanting to go to New Orleans, for instance, recently. You know, and there's places in the States that have culture, but I think that, you know, in general, there's this sort of flatness, you know, there's a lack of artistry in the way that things are built in a lot of places. And, you know, say for instance, you go to Taos, New Mexico, there's a lot more culture there, or, you know, so I'm just trying to think of that and just be get out of my own sort of suburban environment and be aware that there's so many other ways that humans impact the sort of aesthetic of the environment. And so I'm just wanting to inject more of that into my story. Being in a place like Ladakh where it's very influenced by Tibetan Buddhism, there's so much of that's woven into everything. You know, if you pay attention, it's you really see the culture and the predominant religion built into every building. And as you know, as modernity is like kind of coming through and steamrolling through a place like Ladakh, as it has done all over the world, you know, things are becoming a little bit more streamlined and, you know, a little bit more flat and like Americanized. I just think the Americanization of the world is like so ugly. Like everything is so just sort of sterile and boring and like corporate looking. But even still, it's like, you know, you're seeing, you know, people building these guest houses, and while there's like, you know, potential problems with that, like with the tourism being a big impact in the region, like they still have this like very beautiful like wooden filigree. And so my point being here is that just like it's those little details that I think make the world feel lived in and fleshed out. And I think right now my book is not there. And so that kind of like leads into the next thing that I sort of wanted to talk about, which is that like taking a step back from my book for the past like month has been really, really helpful, because as I said in my last video, I have just been sort of banging my head against the wall. Everything about my second and third act feels very, very disjointed, very disconnected, because that's kind of how I wrote it. I didn't really know how to weave those things together. And so I was just kind of writing scenes as I felt inspired to. So it's like if one scene excited me, I'd be like, okay, I'll write that, even though it's like, you know, the very last scene of the book or something like that. I've been bouncing around a ton. And I realized after taking a step back that a lot of that has to do with me somewhat still being wedded to the original outline that I had when I wrote my first draft. And I think that I really want to liberate myself to abandon that draft, at least to a degree. Like, I think that there's a lot of scenes that I wrote that actually will still work, but I need to reorient them. I need to make sure that the narrative is making sense. There's just been certain things that have felt contrived upon reflection, or have felt like, I just don't know if this makes sense. And then also, you know, when thinking about like how I want this world to feel, it made me really realize that like in a sense, even though this isn't a fantasy, I need to think about it as if it is an epic fantasy, in that the world building needs to be so tight. Everything needs to feel so lived in. But also, you know, if one of the inspirations and especially the structural inspiration of this book is The Lord of the Rings, I really want to lean into that a little bit more. I feel like there's like aspects and things that I've taken and that I'm going to be using, but it's like, it's actually really helpful for me to kind of plot out these certain beats that happen in those books as a way of like orienting my story. You know, I always knew that I wanted a breaking of the fellowship at the end of this book, but the way that I've been kind of writing it is a little bit like, I don't know, it kind of like has all these other random details and sort of like side quest seeming things that are happening that don't really serve that sort of narrative thrust. So it's like, for instance, I'm not going to spoil what happens, but like there's you know, an entrance into a more dystopian sort of story in this book that I thought it was interesting to sort of like hint at. But upon reflection, I'm like, actually, no, these scenes that I wrote that I actually really like, they make a lot more sense for book 2, where the fellowship has broken up already. And I just feel like it's like it would hold more emotional weight. And also one of the other problems too is like, you know, I do have a romantic subplot in this story, but I just started to realize like everything was happening so fast and there wasn't enough time, I think, for like that connection to happen within the context of the A plot. You know, if I'm thinking of my plot, it's like the B plot is the romantic subplot. The A plot needs to be at the focus, because this isn't meant to be a romance. The romance is an aspect of the story, but like not the primary driver of any of what's happening in the story. So, and I was feeling like a little bit like I was putting more emphasis on the romance, because I was maybe a little confused about how to incorporate the A plot into Act 2. In Act 3, it was like making sense, but it just felt like, I don't know, it just felt like such a tonal shift between Act 1 and Act 2 and Act 3. And I think that that's okay, but it still needs to feel cohesive. It still needs to feel like it makes sense. And so I've decided that I need to add a lot more action into Act 2 and more, have a little bit more of a blending of the A and B plot together, have some like intense A plot driven action happening that incorporates the romantic subplot. as a way to like build tension and also intrigue, but also like just give the characters a little bit more time to spend together. Like it just felt like it was just happening too quickly. Things were changing too quickly. The tone shifting was happening too much. I really do feel like I need to redo Act 2 and Act 3, like from a plotting perspective. And so, you know, I don't have a lot of time. I'm trying to do a lot this month because I want to make sure that I am doing a lot of drafting during November. You know, I think it will be fun to do some like NaNoWriMo related things. I think that that's something that, you know, is interesting and people get excited about. And I also really want to be drafting, and I'd rather be drafting book 2, or at least starting. I think the problem with my process, I don't know if this is a problem, but it's very nonlinear. It's like I am not doing this, I think, the way that I'm supposed to, which is like fully complete a draft and then fully complete the next draft and then fully complete the next draft. It's like I got to a point with draft 2 where I was like, well, this isn't working. I'm not going to waste my time completing this where it's not working. So I haven't actually written this story like cover to cover, like fully. You know, there was a lot of gaping holes in draft 2. And so it's like with draft 3, I'm hoping that I can actually write it cover to cover with a new plot for Act 2 and 3. And I think that will hopefully work. The problem with draft 2 was I knew going into it that Act 1 didn't work. I hadn't yet fully understood how Act 2 and Act 3 weren't working yet. And so, you know, I think this is just part of the process. And I just am, you know, I'm just accepting that like I might write like 10 drafts of this book. Like that just might happen. And I think it'll all be worth it in the end, especially since it's like the more that I draft book 1, the more that books 2 and 3 are taking shape. And I feel like that's really, really important. I really don't want to feel like I'm creating all of these problems for myself in book 1 that I then have to solve like retroactively in book 2 and 3. So it feels like it's happening the way that it's supposed to happening, but it is slower than I was hoping. I mean, actually like way slower. Like I honestly, I thought that I was going to have this published like this April, which is crazy. I can't even believe that I thought that would happen. I think it's just like, you know, you get excited and you think like, oh yeah, I have this idea that's amazing and I'm totally going to be able to execute it. And there's nothing wrong with this outline. And it's not until you're drafting that you start to realize that it's like, oh, actually like these certain plot beats don't work. Oh, actually my characters want to do something different. This isn't going to work because my characters have like come to life before my eyes and they have a say in what happens here. And it does, and what I had written or what I thought was going to happen isn't actually what's going to happen. And so I just think that that's just part of the process. And I think writing a trilogy is like a different beast than just writing a standalone. And I do feel like a little delusional or naive for thinking that I could do this for my debut. But as I've been rereading this, and here you can kind of see this is the draft. This is like what I have so far. This is draft 2. So this is what I have so far. But as I've been rereading it, I'm like, this isn't bad. Like there's a lot of pacing problems. Everything happens too fast. There needs to be more world building. There's a lot of white room syndrome for sure. But as far as the story goes, I think it's actually pretty intriguing. And I think that, you know, I'm reading it and I'm like, oh, this is interesting. This is interesting. And so I'm really looking forward to going through and, you know, refining that and making sure like Act 2 and Act 3 feel like there's like this same sort of narrative momentum. And yeah, and I just want, again, like I really want people to love these characters because I really love them, and I want people to love this world and like imagine this world. I think one of the reasons why I wanted to write this book is because, you know, I feel like the world feels so bleak right now, and part of it is it's like we can't imagine a different future. We can't imagine the possibilities other than them being very bleak and like dystopian. And while my story has dystopian elements, it's like the dystopia is like a sect, like a group of people who are coming to try to recreate this global civilization through colonialism and extraction and like, you know, plantation capitalism and all these different things that have created the world that we live in today that like to me feels very alienating and inhumane. And so it's like, you know, but it's like that's the antagonistic force, right? And so it's like helpful for me to be imagining a world where it's like the world is really peaceful and really beautiful, and there's a lot of connection, and there's like this balance that humans have struck. And I feel like that's really important to, I feel like it's important for us to be able to imagine, you know, like the future is only as bright as we can imagine it to be. And this isn't about like having a utopian vision for society even. It's like, you know, so much of what I learned at this Planet Local Summit is just like, you know, that there is this like common humanity that I think a lot of us miss. And I've been really, really privileged in my life to be able to experience so many people who are doing such incredible things in the world, and like feel in my own body like what is possible, like what kind of healing of the earth is possible. Like I've been so privileged to be able to just like see it myself and be a part of it. And going to this summit was just like, you know, everybody that I spoke to, like from all over the world, you know, I was having conversations with people like literally from all over the world, you know, from, you know, young people who grew up in Da Nang and who are making like new eco villages and creating all of these like educational projects, and, you know, people in like northern Thailand, and there's a lot of people from India who are doing incredible things. And then, you know, there's like Australians and British people, and, you know, people who live in Romania, and like people from Africa. There's people from all over the world who are doing such incredible work and who are thinking so deeply and so profoundly about like the state of the world. And one of the things that was just in common was like, you know, this is a localization movement, which is like in a lot of ways resisting against the machinification of the world, resisting against modernity. And it just felt so good to be in such brilliant company, like, and to feel like it's like, oh my God, yeah, like I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy for feeling this way. I'm not crazy for wanting to write a book like this. You know, like that these ideas are, I wouldn't say that these ideas are mainstream yet, but I think that people are more open to them as things continue to break down. People are going to be more and more open to these sorts of stories. And so, you know, that's just kind of the framework that I'm trying to come from, is like, this is a practice of me imagining a better future, or at least a realistic future, a future that feels possible. But, you know, the caveat being that like the people now, if the future of my book is to happen, and there's to be this like peace in the world, and this like plurality and diversity of cultures, and this diversity of ways of being, and this sort of sovereignty that I'm imagining, it's like people today need to be doing things to set that up, to create lifeboats, to like spread the word of like a different type of worldview. And so, you know, this is where my imagination goes. It's very grounded in what I believe could be reality. And I think not everybody's going to agree with my interpretation of reality. Not everybody's going to agree with my interpretation of what the future could look like. Nevertheless, I feel like this is something I'm uniquely equipped to write about and to share. And I hope that my skills are good enough to be able to express these things in this story. And so anyway, that was kind of a rant. I'm going to stop rambling. I just wanted to give a little bit of an update on Fall of Men. So right now I'm going through the manuscript, I'm editing, I'm writing notes. I'm going to start rewriting and doing draft 3 just as soon as I'm done with that. And as soon as I have a sort of a better idea of what I want acts 2 and 3 to be like. And then, yeah, I'm just going to be off to the races from there. I would love to have beta readers during November. I don't know if that's going to be possible, but I would really love to try, or at least send it to a couple of people so that there could just be another set of eyes on it while I'm working on drafting other things or working on plotting book 2 and 3. You know, there's a lot of work to do. I think I am accepting that this process is very like crazy and insane, and like, you know, it's like the sort of like beautiful mind room in my mind right now where it's like I'm like, what the fuck is going on? But I think, you know, as long as I can kind of just keep trucking along, as I like literally have in my planner, just like do anything, like doesn't matter what it is. I think, you know, previously I was like, you know, I have to write I have to write every single day, I have to be drafting every single day. And right now I'm just like, I'm not in a place where I can do that. So I'm just like, do whatever, just do something. And that's good enough for me right now. But yeah, it would be cool if I could be a little bit more focused on the second book by November. But you know what? Who knows? I'm just gonna keep I'm just gonna keep doing my best and I'll adjust if necessary. I do think that I've decided that like I'm not gonna publish book 1 until probably I'm like finished drafting draft 1 of book 3. And that like puts my timeline way farther back than I had wanted to initially. Because I thought, I'd just be able to like pump these out, like, of course, once you have the idea, it's like so easy to write it. And it's like, no, that's not how this is working at all. I think I'll probably end it here because there's some lawn mowing happening outside. And so I just wanted to say thank you again to all of my new subscribers. It's been really fun. I've been watching this like AI video that I made kind of blow up. And I feel like I want to do more videos like that too, that are like a little bit less about my novel trilogy. And so look forward to that. I have one in the works that I'm thinking about right now. It's really fun to see that I'm, getting a lot of engagement on that video and that my subscriber count is going up. And so thank you so much for being here. If you have subscribed, if you're new, like, thank you again for being here and watching. But one thing that I did want to say too is it's like, if you're interested at all in my perspective on things or like where my perspective comes from, my project Death in the Garden that I've been doing with my partner Jake for the past 5 years, I really recommend you check it out because I've interviewed probably, I don't even know. After doing the interviews just barely with local features, I've probably done like 100 interviews with experts and people and farmers and, authors and stuff in the past 5 years that have really helped form my worldview. But I also have a lot of essays that I've written there. But more than anything, like we're making films, we're making short films and, trying to make full-length documentaries just about like the state of the world. And so, it's like so much of Fall of Men, like 100%, Fall of Men would not exist if not for Death in the Garden. And so if you're interested in any of this that I'm saying, like, please go check out Death in the Garden. Please go subscribe. I'm also just going to put right here at the end of this video, go check out our interview with Helena Norberg Hodge that we just posted. It'll give you a primer on what I just did in Ladakh, but also just like, she's an incredible wealth of wisdom and knowledge and inspiration for exactly everything that I'm trying to talk about here. So I'd really love for you to check that out. Go check out Death in the Garden. And yeah, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your attention and have a good one.